going to have a bit of a debate today. We're going to... Someone said we're already arguing. We're not going to argue. It's going to be a civil conversation about what really is the best of the best when it comes to Final Fantasy. When I first started playing the Final Fantasy games, I didn't like them at all. I was very much a Zelda guy. I couldn't understand why people wanted to wait there and watch long cutscenes for long periods of time before you actually got to press another button. I kind of thought, well, you might as well watch the movie, right? Because I was too young, didn't quite get it. So I went back and played every single one of them, from 1 right till to 13. And something changed in me. There were some surprises. And suddenly I turned into the person who knew more about Final Fantasy than the Final Fantasy guys. Fanata has already got his rank in there. According to Fanata, being the constant troll that he is, he thinks they got progressively worse as they went on. So there you go, that's it. Cut the stream, it's all over. So thanks, good night guys. Gizra, Final Fantasy X was my first. I tried 7 years ago when I had a PS2. Didn't like the ATB, got stuck around the coral prison area, gave up. Going backwards can sometimes be quite difficult. That's where I was quite fortunate because I decided to start at the very beginning and work my way through them all, having enough of the consoles to be able to do that. So I saw that natural progression in system. Okay, without further ado then, because we've got a lot to get through, I'm going to go straight in with my favourite Final Fantasy game. Bam! No, it's not. My favourite Final Fantasy game is Final Fantasy IV. And specifically Final Fantasy IV on the DS. 4 is my favourite because it's a fantastic fantasy world. I feel every character gets a decent amount of story. No one's along for just the ride or just to fill up the roster. They've all got a really good story arc that they follow. There's a lot of it covers a fair amount of years. That you can have 5 characters in your party, which I never understood why they never went back to that. I understood maybe from a graphical standpoint, but as far as strategy goes, having 5 characters in your party made a huge difference, especially with 3 on the front line, 2 on the back, your magic casters casting over the shadow of your melee attacks. It really made a sort of difference to how you set up your party, what moves you had. The music is phenomenal. I really like the main character, how he has to progress through being with the bad guys and then switching over to the good guys. The bad guy in it, Golbez, he's really interesting because he's not really a bad guy per se. It's a bit like the Darth Vader kind of thing, if we're out too many spoilers, but I guess if you're coming in here, we're talking about in depth about Final Fantasy, I can't get away from it really. With a lot of these other Final Fantasies that we'll talk about, there's many characters in there that I can go pick up a character and go, what's the point? Why is this character here? I can't do that with Final Fantasy IV. Plus the surprise bit at the ending where the game completely turns on its head, and you have to sort of suddenly everything you've learned you have to put together just to get through that last dungeon. My only critique that I could possibly have with this game is there's these things that these skills that you can attach to the characters, and you can't unlearn them. So you can potentially mess up a really good strategy that you might have later on by equipping a skill to a character. It's locked to that character, and they might leave the party, or you might not have the other skill, might not go well with them. It's stupid. You should be able to equip them and unequip them as much as you like, and it's a very stupid decision just to lock them. It's like HMs in Pokemon. You kind of mess up a Pokemon if you stick cut on them. You can't really use that Pokemon, you have to go get another one. Only in Final Fantasy, you can't really get another Cecil or anything like that. You're stuck. You've messed it up, you have to start again. So that is the only gripe I have. But apart from that, it is my favourite Final Fantasy, just because it's so tight in its gameplay. It's the first game in the series, if you've played them from the beginning, that took all the jobs and put characters over the top of them, and gave them personalities and built them into their storyline. You know, monks and dragoons and white mages and all that kind of stuff. It was the first game where they actually put characters to the jobs, which was really good. Vagra says, my critique of 4 is that it's too easy, though it handles its difficulty spikes well, but the DS version is definitely much more challenging, especially that last dungeon. The increase in the difficulty spike at the end was a bit off-putting to begin with, but it was really fun the second time I played it through, knowing it was coming up. So yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Vagras. Now I've got a decision to make, because I always struggle with this one. I'm going to go with number 2 on my list is going to be Final Fantasy X. Followed by Final Fantasy 9. First of all, why is 10 better than 9? Simple. Limit break, or the trance system that they have. So if you don't know, after 7 and 8, where you build a bar up to go get your biggest and baddest special moves, in 9 it was based, they put this trance system in where if you take enough damage, your character starts flashing and transforms and can do loads of extra damage and specials and whatever. However, you've got no control over when it triggers. So when you could be doing a dungeon, kill the easiest enemy in the world, your trance triggers, you kill that, you know, only one enemy out of 20 left or whatever, and you've wasted your trance, and the next enemy you come across is a boss. Really annoyed me. Hated it. I just why on earth they didn't have it on a button or something? It was incredible. It never landed in a useful time for me, so that really annoyed me. That's why 10 just tips 9, because I don't think it has any of those issues. Why is 10 number 2 on my list? 10 came out in a pretty special time. I really hated the PlayStation. I was Nintendo all the way, but I couldn't doubt the pop culture impact that 10 had. Everybody talked about 10. Everybody. There was posters, there was action figures, it was everywhere. I really liked, because again, I like a game that gets to the point, and I do think Final Fantasy X did that. You were locked into a single path, but the characters were really good and an interesting take on the different jobs again, with the black mages and the summoners and things like that. They all had a really unique look to them, and the world was really endearing. Plus the battle system was nice and straightforward. They trimmed a lot of the fat off. It was just a really enjoyable game. Unlike 4, there was a few characters in there that I don't think they quite finished up well. I know some people are going to argue that they did in 10 too, but we'll get to that later. And a lot of people didn't like 9 back in the day, because 7 and 8 moved Final Fantasy from this kind of fantasy-esque knights and magicians and stuff like that, wizards, and moved to a steampunk kind of thing. And especially over here in PAL regions, we didn't have many RPGs, if any. 9 is very much a throwback to Final Fantasy 1, 2 and 3, and a bit of 4. And because I played them in order, that prepared me for 9, and it was exactly what it was intended to be, a throwback. After gradually moving along these fantasy settings to get to a steampunk kind of future, it was so refreshing to suddenly jump back to 9 and have this fantasy world, this whimsical planet with all these amazing scenes. I think a lot of people forget what actually happens to these characters. Vivi, his character arc, is so brilliant. How he goes from this outcast where no one likes him to sort of see his people and how they're treated, and then how he rises above that to sort of become a hero, and then the ending. The relationship between Dagger and Zidane, and how they reveal that Zidane has come back to rescue Dagger from this mediocre life as a princess in a castle. Oh my god, and that music, it's you wouldn't think you'd get that from what looked like almost Muppet-like characters. But again, there's exceptions. That chef, can anyone help me? What was the name of the chef? that character feels very much like they just chucked it in there. I believe the chef's a blue mage, but what impact does that chef have on the story? Very little. For now, every character in 9 and what's most important to them taken away, and it's bloody beautiful. Final Fantasy running at its peak, maybe not the final boss context though. I think the final boss was just kind of, they needed a big bad to go up against, but that's not what the story is about. The story is about, like you say, Fana, everybody losing what they hold dear, but then finding something new to replace it, which is more beautiful than what it was before. Great stuff. Quincy, that's the one. Yeah, that stupid chef, very much comic relief. Yeah, but I didn't find anything that chef did funny. Did you? Was there anything in there? It was like Final Fantasy's version of Big the Cat. Just, yeah, unnecessary. Oh. Final Fantasy 3. Next. Gonna go with Final Fantasy 3 next, followed by Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2. Now, this is Final Fantasy 3 on the DS and Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on the PSP. Ooh. I don't know, I might be changing my mind. Kisra says, watch my back. I'm beginning to think about this game here and where that should go. Because I have a roller coaster ride with 7. I really do. So let me talk about 3 first of all, because I do think that is probably a solid lock-in 4. 3 is everything that is the job system's perfect game for me. A lot of people think 5 is, but I think 5, maybe because I played the DS remake of Final Fantasy 3, whereas the only one that's over here that I could play of Final Fantasy 5 was the GBA one. But Final Fantasy 3 is, again, blank characters, very little in the way of kind of characters-driven storyline, but the world pushes the story, but there's not really that much there. However, out of all of them, it's probably the most fun to replay, because there is about 40 jobs, I think, in the DS one, maybe 50. So you only have 4 playable characters, so you can play that game hundreds of different ways. And there's no story or anything, or any characters dropping in and out of your party to mess that up. You are literally locked in with those 4 characters, and the last boss area is a nightmare, because it's a boss rush with no save points, and it does take about 2 hours to complete unless you grind god levels to be able to cream the bosses. And then you've got one of the most difficult unfair bosses at the end ever, which can send you right back to that dungeon, and it's really annoying. So that does knock it down a few pegs as a result. And I suppose you got the game saves right now where you could probably get around that, but on the DS I didn't have that, so that really annoyed me. And there's no real good place to grind that I could find to try and get past this last boss area, because there's about, I don't know, 15, 20 levels different. So that whole boss area at the end is a real test to your team, but a huge climb, unnecessarily so. But it's so cute, and the character designs are just so endearing and memorable. And any other kind of anybody who plays Final Fantasy outside of the 10, the main 15, sorry. Final Fantasy 3 is the one that tends to make you go, oh, I know what that character is. That's a white mage. Oh, that's a red mage. Oh, that's a blue mage. There's a dragoon. Because that's where a lot of the looks came from. Interesting you'd put this over 6. I'll cover 6. 6 is a heartbreaker for me. That's 3. Right, now let's explain myself on 1 and 2 before I get to 7. We'll have a big piece on 7. Final Fantasy 1. I heard lots of nightmare stories about Final Fantasy 1. When I got to Final Fantasy 1 on PSP, it had already been remade about 50 million times. So a lot of I understand if people think, why have I put Final Fantasy 1 so high up? Because it's the most simplistic out of all of them. But by the time I got to Final Fantasy 1, which was after Final Fantasy 12 had been released, on the PSP, they had refined it completely. It looked gorgeous. They'd redone the music. It was faster. It had been balanced and tweaked. A lot of the glitches had been taken out. It looked a lot more modern. than what the NES one looks like, which is what a lot of people associate with it. And it's just fun. There's no grinding, and if you do grind, you get level up so quickly that you just get straight to the point. There's no tutorials or big pieces of writing getting in the way. It's just a fun RPG to pick up and play, and you can go back to it any time and play it. Within minutes, you're fighting the first boss. And there's 5 dungeons, 5 super bosses, and a killer last boss, and that's it. You can blitz through it with enough skill within a few hours. And sometimes that's when it comes to, if the game's that solid and that much fun, that ranks really highly for me. 2 is an unusual one to place high. I'm shocked someone out there really likes it. I like 2 again because it's virtually the same game as 1. So if I have to rank 1 high, then I have to rank 2 high. The only problem with 2 is it's broken as hell. Because if anyone who doesn't know, Final Fantasy 2, when you attack enemies, you level up. So if you just made your entire party do nothing but melee attack, by the end of the game they will have like 9,999 hit. If you made a character heal, and that's the only thing they ever did, they would be able to heal your entire party really easy by the end of the game. So it's just broken. You could basically go around the first area, hit every enemy once, multiple times, and then blitz through the rest of the game. It's super, super easy, but it's technically the same game. So you can't have 2. 2 is worse than 1, but you can't have 1 up high if you're not going to have 2. Vagrus, I really didn't like 2's leveling system. At least 5 had plenty of places to AP farm and master everything in a short time. 2 was awful and took forever, and magic was really weak. It was, but I played a lot of melee, so I didn't really find that so much. But if you kept casting magic, again, like I said, you would eventually get there. But melee was completely broken in 2. But it didn't ruin the game. It was still fun, and it had more of a story than 1. And the Emperor is actually quite a cool villain. So again, it's very similar to 1, but a bit more broken. Ash, so like Skyrim, the more you use a skill, the better they get at it. Yes, that's what happens with 2, but to such an extreme amount, Ash. Kizra, I need to finish Crisis Core, but it's getting to be a pain leveling up. Some of these do. A lot of. If you're wondering why I haven't selected these ones at the bottom yet, it's because a lot of these I struggle so bad towards the end game. This is where I have my long struggle with Final Fantasy VII. Okay, let's talk through my history of Final Fantasy VII. Disc 1, I love it. I think Final Fantasy VII's Disc 1 is fantastic. But Disc 2 is where the game completely falls apart, because there are far too many mini-games. And it's not even funny. And everybody who remembers this game and the nostalgia about this game always talk about Disc 1 and Disc 3. They never, apart from the Gold Saucer, but they never talk about what happens in Disc 2. For example, you have the squats, you have the dolphin jumping minigame, you have the section where you've just got to breathe and bring someone back to life. I didn't like the Gold Saucer, but a lot of people, because a lot of it's mini games, but a lot of people like the dating thing. There's a slap mini game where Tifa and the boss, they're not having a battle, they're just slapping each other. That god awful tower defense game where all these kind of matchstick characters are going up a mountain. Awful. All of it is just not fun, and no one ever says it's good. There are people that argue, well, it's varied, it's like the Grand Theft Auto of its time. It's got all these different types of gameplays in it. No. As far as I'm concerned, if you're going to do a gameplay style right, you've got to put it in and you've got to do it right. If you want to do a racing game, make it a racing game. Just because you've put a really bad racing game into your RPG doesn't make you varied. It's just got loads of terrible games to make up one big one. The story just gets really weird. And there's a lot of, when you're finding out about other characters and you're just going through pages after page after page of writing. No, again, it just crawls down to a snail's pace. But yeah, snowboarding. Really, you found that fun? I hated it. Maybe because I was playing 1080 snowboarding at the time. I was playing that. Most of them are optional. I don't know if they are. I don't think they were, Ash. I come across a lot of them. Yes, the tower defense game was. Here's an example. And I didn't mention this with 10 because I also have this problem with 10 as well. Dodging lightning bolts for £200 to get 200 times to get your top materia. Rubbish. Stupid idea. That person does not deserve to be in game design. That was a terrible idea, and for a long time I think it was a mistake. 7 has got loads of that all over the place. Raising chocobos to for hours and hours, chocobo racing to get the is it the black or the gold one to get Knights of the Round Table. Kick-ass summon, but my God, you know, divide your fan base down the middle just to work out how to get every materia. Wow, no. This is why I'm so divided on 7. Cider Snyder says most of them were mandatory. That's how I remember it, but it has been a long time. Much as I hate Blitzball, so Cider Snyder goes on, in 10 I was mostly optional, just one of the story and you don't even need to win it. Yeah, that's why 10 gets a lot more higher ranking for me, because it didn't force me to do mini games I didn't enjoy. Clamping on the materia. So here's the great thing about 7. The way you clamp your materia onto your weapons has different abilities and different ways you can break the game. But not unlike 1 or 2, it does it in such a way that you can sort of poison characters when you hit them, or cast thunder on everybody if you have all on it, or all these kind of really cool things you could do with the materia. That was a mini game of its own done right, and they did a great job with that in the remake as well. Oh, I might have to do that, you know. Talking about it, I think 7 might have to go up higher. I think it's just the bad is really bad, but the when you start thinking about the good, it does get better. Oh, we were a bit passionate about this one. Okay. Knights of the Round is worth it, says Kizra. For the chocobo racing, it is divisive. I didn't like it. I know Sarah loves it, but I hated chocobo racing. It really did my nut in. The characters are really good. I do like Cloud as a main protagonist because he can be whatever you want him to be. A lot of people went off him when he got all mopey, but in Final Fantasy VII he can be whatever you want. I really do like Tifa, just because of how fun her limit break and moves are. Aerith's story is iconic in its own right. Even though a lot of the other Final Fantasy games did what happened to Aerith first, that one obviously had a lot of impact, and it was, you know, she was the main healer in the game, so it really made a big difference. Barrett, I like the bit where with the gun and his mate with the gun arm. That was really cool, interesting storyline. But again, it was a bit annoying. If you'd never used Barrett in your team, there was no way of leveling him up, so you could get stuck at that point. I actually know people who got stuck on that part of the story because they never used Barrett, and there's no way to level him up. If you haven't, you could literally get stuck there. Even like Vincent. Now, they don't handle Vincent's storyline too well in Final Fantasy VII. He's just got a few tidbits, like 3 main story bits, because he's a character you completely miss. I know people who've never even heard of him until they saw Advent Children, and they went, "Who's this?" And it says, "It's Vincent from Final Fantasy VII." They completely missed him. I think I'm going to leave 7 where it is after talking through it. You guys have brought up some memories about 7 that I'd kind of repressed. But as much as its bad points are, it's still a great game, and I'd be doing 7 an injustice if I said that 1 and 2 were higher. Is it higher than 3? I'd rather go back and play 3 over and over again. I'd play 7 once in a while, so I don't know if that's... Oh, I don't know. I'll have to give it some thought when we've got them all on the board and see. The B tier, for me, are the games which would be good if they were in the hands of a different director, or if they were modernised. So I'm going to put 6 in there. Now 6, in my opinion, would be the best RPG ever made if it was just given some love, polish and updates. The story is fantastic, the characters are great, the bad guy is so much better than any other bad guy in Final Fantasy. He poisons an entire village just to get to the main character. and laughs about it. And you see him do it, and you see all the bodies all over the place. That's madness. The last boss music is phenomenal. So good. The sort of steampunk world that you go to, I think, is a lot more interesting than a lot of the other areas. You could argue that you're never winning. Throughout the game, with the whole party in Final Fantasy VI, do they ever win? Even when they've beaten the last boss, have they won? That's such an interesting sort of story as you go through it, and you see these people that are trying to do the best they can, but no matter what they try, they never win. You know, it just gets worse and worse and worse for the party. The bad guys actually win in the game. Split up your party, and then you have to collect find the missing team members, or you can go after the last boss by yourself. And it has a different type of ending depending on what you do. That's great. I love that. I love the fact that the world is basically destroyed, but the enemies, the protagonists still have to pick themselves up, grab everybody together and say, look, the world is gone to hell, but we can't let him get away with it. And they go after him, and when they do go after him, the last boss is mad. And hence the thing, Death Kefka, dancing mad. Right, but why is it not the best Final Fantasy? I didn't play it with nostalgia eyes. It's a Super Nintendo game. I played the Game Boy Advance version. So I played the enhanced version where they got rid of a lot of the glitches. I know some of the music and stuff is not as good, but I had seen the Super Nintendo do a lot better graphics-wise than what they did in Final Fantasy VI. Having your little sprite do this to show emotion, and having kind of them going like that as an emotion. I had seen Mario, Sparkstar, even the Turtles from the Turtle game show more visual movement in the cutscenes than what I had seen in Final Fantasy VI. And it was a waste. And that really annoyed me. And it didn't do any of the characters justice. And even the moves, massive big flashes, summons that just sort of come on, a gif that sort of comes onto the screen like that and goes away. Dare I say it, it's, I've made some stuff for this show which has one or two more extra frames of animation than some of the characters in this game. If it is your first RPG, I can completely understand why you would like it. But it wasn't mine. And as a result of that, I just felt that it just didn't get the Super Nintendo to do enough to deliver the story the way it should have done. If they remake it, without a shadow of a doubt, would be the best Final Fantasy game, if not best RPG ever. And it should have been remade more than 7, but that's what people want. They want 7. A lot of good stuff, and Terra is such a great character as well. Having a mage as the main protagonist, fantastic. And the way that Kefka likes to play with her mind, and how she goes like all Super Saiyan or whatever the equivalent would be at that time. Great, but it just looks so bad when they animate it, and the Super Nintendo could do so much better. This is where it gets really difficult. Is like ranking the ones that got clear problems with them. Okay, let's clear the decks a bit. It's weird seeing 8 below 2. I'll explain why 8 for me was such a bust. I think it's the biggest disappointments that really hit hard for me. I do think 5 is the worst. 13 belongs in D. Someone says that. Someone said 13 does belong in D. It's so divisive, isn't it? Should I? Actually, no. There is a game that's worse on here. And that's 4. AF. Does anyone know what 4AF is? So 4AF is a sequel to Final Fantasy IV, where you play as Cecil's son. Now the thing about that is, Cecil's son is like the mirror image of Cecil, and you literally play the same storyline with slight tweaks. You go through all the same locations, you beat all the same bosses. It's split up to horrible chapters because that's how it was released. It was awful. I hated it. And as I was playing the game, I just thought I might as well just be playing 4 and liking it. This is unnecessary. And in the same way that I'm going to stick 10.2 in there, higher than 5 and higher than 4, it's just unnecessary. It doesn't need to exist. And I think 10.2 is a little better than those, but it's just I just didn't find 10.2 fun to play. Is it better than 13? That's the question, though. I'm not going to say anything any more about 4 AF. Just know that it's pointless. If you completely left it out, it would probably make 4 a better experience, to be honest. As for 5, I played 1 to 4 and was on a kind of journey ride there. When I got to 5, apart from the beginning, where the beginning is quite interesting with its dragon kind of characters and stuff like that, the character's just not interesting, and the animation is even worse than 6. Yes, there's loads of character types in there and loads of jobs, and more so than 4 and 3. But it doesn't mean anything. You unlike 3, where you've got actually interesting locations to go to, 5, I just feel that you don't. There's nothing memorable about it. The only thing that's memorable about 5 is X-Def, because I think he's hilarious. Because he seems to know wherever the good guys are at any time. They go, they're getting too close to where I don't want them to be. I'm going to start a forest fire and trap them all and burn them all to death. Ha ha ha. And then in the end he turns into a giant tree. Random. I love it. 5 is not bottom tier. I've just explained why I don't like 5. But like I said, I'm happy to hear arguments as to why you think I'm wrong. And maybe we can carry it on in Discord if we haven't got time for the stream. But please chuck him in there, Vegas. I'd love to hear it. But that's just how I experienced that game. Maybe it was fatigue, because I literally had played them one after the other. But I don't think so. Have you played every single one of these? I have played everything that is in D upwards. I haven't played Final Fantasy 12 RW. I haven't played 13.2, and I haven't played Lightning's Returns. The reason I have not played 13.2 and Lightning Returns is because I thought 13 was so bad, because I was so bored of just the battle system playing itself and the story, me just basically pressing a button to go through the story and everything else. And I can already hear Ash, because I think we've had this conversation before, where there's little difference between 13 and 10. I disagree. I think 10 had enough of a battle system and a little bit more freedom of where you moved to sort of get into random battles and have more enjoyment and grind if you wanted to. In 13, I did honestly think the story was put too much to the forefront, and I was just along for the ride. The characters looked awesome, and the way that the world looked, and I really wanted to like 13. Everybody was moaning about 13, how it was linear, how you couldn't go off on these massive maps. And after I played 1 through 9, I was like, yes please, I don't want a massive map where I get lost. I want to be just playing my RPG and leveling up characters and getting into the characters, not worrying about where have I got to go and what NPC have I got to talk to progress the game. 5 being so low on your list tells me they must have done a lot to improve 1, 2, 3 and 4 over the D. I believe they have. 1 and 2 plays and looks so smoothly. 3 and 4 are phenomenal. They are really, really good. So if you've not played them, definitely try them out. And they're basically out on Android these days. But you notice I haven't talked about 8. Apart from 13, which was one of the ones I was most looking forward to playing before I played it and got a little bit disappointed, 8 was going to be my favourite. I knew it was. There was times where I wanted to jump straight to 8 when I was getting, playing through them. And because I thought the characters looked great, I thought the cutscenes looked awesome. I remember the TV adverts where it says one day you'll get over this, and it's showing the FMV, and this FMV that looks incredible. Even now, it's still quite impressive, all things considered. But here's my problem with 8. They concentrate so much on Squall as a character, the rest of the party miss out, and it's really jarring. but there's the girl with the nunchucks, who is only there because she gets separated from the rest of her school. Which is cool, by the way. They train people up to be seed warriors in school, and the school floats and moves around. Love that. She gets separated from her party in a school and just happens to bump into Squall's party. And that's it. That's her story. She just happens to tag along for the rest of it. The cowboy character, again, I forget the name. He was supposed to snipe Ultimacia, or whoever she was before she turns into Ultimacia. And he blows it because he hasn't got the guts. That's really compelling, I thought, his story. And then after that, Irvin, that's it, thank you. Sarah's got my back, thank you, Kisra. What happens to his story? Nothing. He does nothing, again, for the rest of the game. The big story change is just to say they all went to a school when they were younger. That's it. That's the reason they were all sort of brought together. And I love the story that they have someone in the past, someone in the future, and the present trying to make all of time into one moment, but they explain it in such a terrible way. But in the end, really, it's just a load of gobbledygook, potentially translated badly, I don't know. But the story just you get so bogged down in what's going on with the story that you just want, can I please play the game? And then that's when the rest of it hits you. Because the game is all about drawing magic. So, in my opinion, there's only one way to play Final Fantasy VIII. And that's to go to a draw point, stock everything to your melee attacks, and then just melee characters over and over again. The summons are great. However, they're unskippable, and they're so long. And then they give you that thing where you press the button over and over again to make them stronger. Magic is useless. If you cast magic, you make yourself weaker. So what's the point? You might as well just stock it. It makes your magic casters weak as a result. I just could not connect with this game as much as I tried. And oh god, does anybody get stuck on that bit in space where you have to catch Rinoa? This cool looking character with a massive gun sword, and I don't care what anyone says, gun swords are cool. He's in a spacesuit and he's kind of going towards Rinoa and they have to catch him. They're having this kind of magical moment in space, but they've got this stupid spacesuits on. Stupid. Hate it. And the last level where you have to go through Ultimacia's dungeon, and she's hard as nails anyway, but trying to get to her for all those kind of backtracking up and down stairs and turn this on and turn that off. Oh, it's awful. Hated it. So I really wanted to like 8. Because I thought it looked the coolest, but once I actually played it, it really annoyed me. And it could be a good game if they just put a game in there. At the time, I just went with 8 and accepted it, but its problems were massively glaring, but its story was decent. There's some interesting parts, and there's a really good theory online about 8 about a certain point, but sadly huge spoilers. I know what you're talking about. I have seen that. However, I do feel sometimes people are just saying that to try and make a really badly told story look good. Squall got a lot of focus, too much. There you go, I agree. Thank you, Vegas. Other than that, I don't see myself replaying it much like 2, but I don't think it's the worst one of the most fans seem to think it is. I don't think it's the worst one. I just think it was the most disappointing. And I think when I put... This is why I did this tier list like this. I am the most upset about Final Fantasy VIII. However, I do think it's better than these games. I do think it's better than 13 because I think you're actually playing a game. Whereas I think in 13 you're playing a movie. The card game is amazing though. A lot of people like the card game. I didn't play it that much. You have to remember I played all these back to back. So when I got to 8, I weren't, after 7 I was done with minigames. I did not want to play any more minigames. I hated the space section. Yeah, right. These are the bits that people forget about, but because they've played them over a long period of time, they played them as kids, and I swear, guys, there's a certain group of people who play Final Fantasy games, and they do not finish them, but they say that's the best game they've ever played. Final Fantasy 12 is the only one that's left. Is Final Fantasy 12 better than Final Fantasy 13? Yes. Yes, it is. Is Final Fantasy 13... Sorry, Final Fantasy 12 better than Final Fantasy 8? Let's talk about Final Fantasy 12 for a bit. They tried to do something different with Final Fantasy 12. Different battle system. Not turn-based, or a little less turn-based. Tried to go with more of an action kind of genre. Has cool bad guys in the way of the judges. The main cast is a bit of a mixed bag. Some are really good, some are kind of like rehashes in a way to other characters. The problem with 12 is it gets to a point where areas are so massive and take ages to get anywhere that it just bores you. I was in the desert for so long that I can barely remember what I did, because it was just so dull. The dungeons were so dull. Walking around the marketplace, dull. It screamed at the same reasons I did not get on with Mass Effect when I first played it, where they have these big open hub-like areas where you kind of have to struggle to find shops, struggle to find the right NPC to talk to, struggle to work out where you've got to go to move the story on. It looks all impressive and it feels like it's people are walking around in this living, breathing world. But really, at the end of the day, you're playing a video game and you just want to make the video game carry on. I just think they overloaded it. There's lots of busy work in it. But my god, that ending's so good. As much as 12 was a grind to get to the end of it, and maybe in the remaster they've fixed all that, because it is on my shelf to play again. That ending cinematic was so impressive, and it was so heartwarming just to see all these characters that you've played with for so long go off on their journey. It was great. I loved it, but it's too much of a chore to get there. What have we got? We have, let's finish this up. We have 4, 10 and 9, first, second and third. I am locked in with that one. I'm happy with that. We have 3, 7, 1 and 2 in A. They may need to be here rather than in A. 5 needs to be higher. I don't like it, Vagrus. 7 is probably better than 3, at least middle tier. Is 7 better than 3? 1 and 2 is only better than 6 because it's had a remake and remaster, and so therefore the animations are better, the character designs and the soundtracks have all been remade. I just can't take 6 seriously sometimes with its janky animation. I want to put 6 higher, but I'd be lying, because I enjoyed 1 and 2 more than I did 6. Personally, I'd regard this list on original releases only. Remakes are like remixes, taking aspects of newer games. It's not dreadfully fair, but it's not my tier list, of course. That's true for now, but I've not played the originals. I have only based them on the games I played, which at the time, the only way I could play 1, 2, 3 and 4 were the ones that were remade and released at the time. I hoped by the time I finished those 4 games, they were going to remake 5 and 6, but they never did that. I never finished 7, 9 and 15, but I will never class them as the best games ever. There we go. I will say that from what I did see of 15, there was a lot of riding in the car and extreme fishing. If I was going to play that, I don't think it would be much higher than 13. Should 13 be there? We're locking this in, guys, because we've come to the end of the stream now. Right. I'm going to go 7's better than 3. It's not better than 9. I don't think 7 is better than 10 as a game. If you brought everything else into 7, it could potentially be up there. But we're just judging Final Fantasy 7 on its own. That's it. That's the top. That's S tier and A tier locked, baby. That's right, for now. There you go. Lock them in, baby. That's right. There we go. 1, 2 has dropped quite considerably afterwards, but I do think, talking to you guys, reminiscing, I do think that's fair. 6 would definitely be here if it wasn't for the graphics and the way it's told its story. It was probably great back then when you played it as a kid, but right now, I don't think so. 8 was a massive disappointment for me. and it was a grind, but I still talk about this game and how enjoyable is some of the aspects of it, whereas I will struggle to tell anything good about 12 except for the ending. And 13, I wasn't playing a game, and I struggled to finish that game. In fact, the reason I didn't play 13, 2 and 3, or Lightning Return, sorry, is because 13 damaged me so much. I think we're there. I think that's it. I think that's the tier list. I'm happy with that.
9, 8, 7,